Midday host on 92.3 The Fan in Cleveland, sports director of News Channel 5 there as well. Andy Baskin with Armen and Levack on 104.5 The Team. Levack's out today. Armen riding solo. And Andy, you were there last night in Oakland at the Oracle Arena for Game 2. Here we are 12 hours after it. Can you believe what you saw last night with Cleveland winning in Game 2?
Well, they had an amazing game plan going into last night. It was hard not to look at the Game 1 box score and say, how are the Cavaliers going to replace Kyrie Irving's 23 points? And you could stare at it all day after Game 1 and go, well, J.R. Smith had 9 points in that first game, but they didn't score off the bench in the second half. And I was trying to figure it out, and the answer became really clear somewhere in the third quarter where the 23 points, they weren't going to make them up offensively. They were going to make up for it defensively, and, man, they were outstanding on defense. And Matthew Dellavedova, for all the jokes, his 42 minutes and 27 seconds last night and his piddly little 9 points is nothing compared to the defense he played last night against the Golden State Warriors. He was outstanding.
Has he been this good all year, or is he just rising to the occasion?
He is rising to the occasion. It was funny because we interviewed a group from Australia probably, 2 or 3 days ago, and the guy looked at me and he goes, nobody knew who Matthew Dellavedova was 6 weeks ago. Nobody knew who he was. In Australia, in his home country.
Yeah. That's incredible. Andy Baskin joining us with Armen and Levack, 104.5 The Team, at Andy_Baskin. He was at the game last night. Andy, obviously Steph Curry had a tough night, and a lot of it had to do with Dellavedova, going 5 of 23 overall, 2 of 15 from the arc. Can Cleveland do that again? Can they continue to muck up Curry's game?
Well, that's what Delly does, and he's gritty. He's just a gritty kid that never stops. His motor keeps moving. He just, to me, still seems scared offensively, but they don't need him to do that if they can control Curry. And it's funny, he had 26 points last night, and we make it sound like he had the worst game ever. He didn't play. I'm sorry, he had 26 points in the first game, and then last night he only had 19. Still had 19 points in an NBA Finals, but just looked off. And the air ball at the end of the game, it just didn't seem like it wasn't very Curry-esque, I guess, for an MVP. But Delly was amazing last night. He really was. As I watched him in the first half, I was like, you know what, he can hang with him, and he's starting to get into his head. And I talked to Chris Broussard about that 2 days ago, and he said if they have any chance, Delly's got to get into Curry's head, and that's exactly what he did.
Andy Baskin out of Cleveland with Armen and Levack. Andy, how concerned are the Cavs about fatigue? I mean, they have a shorter bench, and they play a lot more physical basketball than the opposition.
I don't think they are. They played this way all season. They played 7, 8 guys all year. And in fact, David Blatt was criticized, highly criticized, I know, on our show about not playing enough guys throughout the regular season. Because what happens when you need James Jones to play a little bit more? What happens when you need Mike Miller to play a little bit more? The thing is they become microwaves, and you just turn them on and they go. And I guess that's the beauty of having a veteran that you rested for most of the season. So some of their legs, Mike Miller's legs are pretty fresh. So are James Jones. Those guys didn't play a lot of heavy minutes during the regular season. Sean Marion, I still think, can contribute to this team, especially defensively. And Kendrick Perkins, who I'm kind of surprised didn't get a little bit of time yesterday. But all those guys are still relatively fresh for their age, and if they need to go to them, they go to them. But what seemed like a really bad thing to do during the regular season, not get those guys ready for the playoffs, has turned out to be okay for the Cavs. And Blatt's been able to figure this out with 7, 8 guys, and you lose Kyrie, it just feels a lot worse.
You've mentioned David Blatt multiple times, even more than we've talked about LeBron James thus far in this interview, which is funny because nationally, obviously, it's the opposite. You're there, you're in the locker room, you go to practices, you're with this team. What does David Blatt do? What kind of impact does David Blatt have, obviously in a different role than most head coaches in the NBA?
Well, the one thing about David Blatt is, I think they had a much different philosophy for what they were going to do when the season started. And they start the season, and they maybe didn't have the right players, because David Griffin, the general manager, has said to me multiple times, I didn't get David Blatt the right players to win in the beginning of the season when they were under 500 in 1920. And then LeBron took a little time off there, and they came back, and the offense was totally scrapped. They went to this, iso ball situation they've been using with LeBron, and, when Kyrie came in, it was a little bit different. When Kyrie and LeBron started getting into a rhythm, it wasn't total iso ball. Those two could play off each other like nobody's business. That's why they were so successful. And then you add Kevin Love to it. And so they were able to run their own offensive set that didn't feel like it was David Blatt's. And, he just kind of let them freelance and just go out there and ad-lib, I think, the offense, and it still feels that way. But defensively, I think David Blatt took a step back and go, all right, you know what, here's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to work on the defense. And I really think for all the offensive success they've had, it's the defense is where they are right now. There's no way this team can hang with Golden State if they're trying to run up and down and play the same kind of offensive game Golden State does. Because if Golden State gets cold, they're in trouble. And that's what happened last night because the Cavs played a consistent defense that they played. I know the Bulls know it. I know the Hawks totally understand it. That's the same kind of defense they used in the Eastern Conference Finals, and it worked last night to pull off Game 2 in the NBA Finals.
So those defensive adjustments and the gritty defense and the correct assignments, that credit needs to be given to David Blatt.
Yeah, well, I mean, he can lay out the plan. The players have to execute, though.
Right, but
and
he has the
Iman
plan.
Shumpert
Yeah,
last night did that job because Shump was struggling in the beginning of the game against Klay Thompson. He was struggling, and then he picked it up, and it made a difference. It made a huge difference. He did not feel good about the way he started that game last night. I talked to Shump last night after the game, and he was just like, "I got to play way better." That was just disappointing, and I can't let him get away with what he got away with in the beginning of the game. But he was able to readjust, and they took a time out. He came off for a little bit. He came back, and then they slowed him down. I mean, he still ended up with 34 points last night. So, but he did it enough for them to get a victory.
Yeah, and Shumpert with the clutch 3 in overtime as well. Andy Baskin, News Channel 5 out of Cleveland, 92.3 The Fan as well. He is still in Oakland right now as he talks to us from his hotel room, traveling back to Cleveland later today. Greatly appreciate your time, Andy. At Andy_Baskin on Twitter. Iman Shumpert last night comes through in overtime. J.R. Smith couldn't because he was on the bench after fouling out. And Andy, I got to tell you, from your home for New York sports here in the capital region, we were going nuts saying, this is the J.R. Smith that we saw most of the time in New York. Have you seen J.R. Smith play a dumber game with 3 just really not smart fouls?
It was funny as we were sitting on press row last night. We were like, hey, guess what? The Knicks, J.R. Smith is back. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was the joke last night. They were like, this isn't the J.R. Smith that the Cavs have seen. I don't know what. I mean, I maybe he's trying to be aggressive, but you're right. I mean, some of those fouls last night they were ridiculous. It was just, and then he was frustrated. He was mad at himself last night too for those because he's been playing a much different. I just think his life is so much different in Cleveland than it was in New York, and he doesn't have the distractions. I'm hearing he's playing a ton of golf, and he's just really kind of focused into basketball. So I hope last night was a little bit different than what we can expect for the rest of the playoffs. Although the first game, I mean, he was 3 for 13. That's not the J.R. Smith that we've seen here in Cleveland, especially throughout the playoffs. So if he can just step it up a little bit and give them a little bit more offensive help, they play the same kind of defense they played last night. J.R. Smith gives them a little bit more. They're in great shape.
Andy Baskin out of Cleveland. Andy, you've seen LeBron play every game this season in Cleveland. Where does Andre Iguodala's defensive efforts on LeBron James, where does that rank with all the defenders that he's gone up against this year? Is he towards the top?
39 points, 44 points.
Yeah.
Is that? I mean, there's no one can stop LeBron. Yeah. Nobody can stop LeBron. I was reading story after story going into the NBA Finals going, here's why the Warriors are going to win. Here's why the Warriors are going to do this. And they're going to slow down LeBron James. If you're trying to tell me 44 and 39 is slowing LeBron James down, I have no idea what slowing a guy down is. Nobody can defend LeBron James on that team. Nobody. They have to double or triple team him. Now, the option there is LeBron's got to find an open guy, and I just don't know who he trusts on the floor offensively right now. I know he trusted J.R. Smith during the regular season. I know he trusts Mozgov if he can get him the ball down low, and again, that was a strategy they clearly were using last night. Mozgov needed to finish, and he's a little bit hesitant on that, and his free throw shooting was suspect at best in the first half. Tristan, I know LeBron trusts Tristan, but those are all guys that he trusts down low to get scrappy points. He's got to be able to feel like he can dish the ball off to somebody who can hit it, and I know he did with Kyrie. I know he did with Kevin Love. I don't know that you have that same mental trust when you're driving the ball down the floor and you're going to kick it to Matthew Dellavedova. And prior to the playoffs, it was hit or miss whether he would make the shot. Now I think LeBron's got some trust issues out there on the floor, and I think that's one of the things that's where they're asking these guys to step up. And I still don't feel it. And LeBron's going to have to score 35 plus in every game for them to win.
All right, so if that's the case, and it's going to be LeBron, and everyone and their mom knows that LeBron gets the ball on every single offensive possession, can he keep doing that? Can he keep going 35-plus against the Golden State team that, I mean, obviously they know where the ball's going every single time?
Absolutely. He absolutely can.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, there's prove to me that you can stop him. They can't. They can't stop LeBron. And LeBron, if LeBron drives at the end of game one, instead of taking that long shot and starts going towards the hoop and tries to make a lay-in, this series is 2-0 Cavs. I mean, that's how close this thing is. That's how good these two teams are. I mean, I'm not expecting Steph Curry to have another game like he had last night. He's going to get hotter than he did. Mm-hmm. This is going to be a great series, and now we know for sure we're coming back here to Oakland next weekend. So I think this is what everyone asked for. I just think they asked for it with Kyrie, and they were kind of hoping that Kevin Love would have been along for the ride when the playoffs started.
Oh, what could have been. All right, so Andy, here's what I want to know. The optimism level amongst the Cleveland fans from Friday when we found out that Kyrie's done for the year to this morning after last night's win.
Well, we have a thing called the 480 Bridge, which is like this big bridge in Northeast Ohio. And, people were talking about how everyone was going to jump off after the first one because, people were so bummed out. Not only did you lose, you lost in overtime where you couldn't score. Kyrie Irving looked like he was back at 85%, and now he's done for the rest of the playoffs. Nothing felt good. And then there was this fear you were going to be swept. And let's face it, here's the other thing, too. Last night was the first time the Cavaliers have ever won an NBA Finals game. Ever. This team's never, they've only had 4 chances prior, or 5 chances if you count game 1. This is the first time in franchise history they've won a game in the NBA Finals. So there is definitely some optimism going on right now. There was optimism. I want to say midday yesterday, people just kind of turned the page and said, "Here we go. You know what? You've got opportunity. Go out there and take advantage. And by the way, we still have LeBron James. So as long as you have LeBron, you have a chance. And that's kind of what everybody's banking their hopes on right now. But the key is you have to have LeBron and defense, and that's how they won.
And hey, with no Love and with no Irving, this is the biggest way that LeBron could ever cement any kind of legacy.
This will be the biggest, baddest, best. There are not enough adjectives to describe what it would mean to his legacy if LeBron can push the Cavs to a championship. I mean, you put yourself right up there with the argument of. I mean, I don't want to say it because there's been so many great players, but he will be in the argument for best of all time if he can do this.
Love it, Andy.
I don't know how you can't put him in that argument.
No,
I mean, look at all the records he holds, and look at all the stats he's gotten. All of those things are laying out there, and that the argument against him is that he's lost 2 NBA Finals with Miami. That's the only negative you can look at his whole career at this point. And the other negative he corrected by coming back to Cleveland. People always say, well, he had to leave to go get it. Well, he left, he got it, and now he's back, and his supporting cast isn't what anyone thought it was. Someone down the road is going to go, well, LeBron James, if they should come back and win, they'll go, well, LeBron James had, Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love on that team. And they're going to have to go, oh, you know what? Those guys didn't play in the NBA Finals. So, I mean, this is a monumental task for LeBron James. Monumental.
Andy, spending time with LeBron like you have, how does he do it on and off the court? You have Johnny Manziel. He can't stay out of the spotlight. LeBron James has been a superstar since he was an early teenager. How has he constantly off the court kept everything straight to where it just funneling it all to where we are today?
He's a public person, but he's also a very private person, and I think that the key for LeBron, I want to say it was Nike. I want to say early on. I think you've got to give credit. And he only trusts a certain amount of people. I mean, he's got his group of horsemen, and he's got his business partners, and that's it. I mean, LeBron doesn't go outside of that realm. He really doesn't. And I think that's why, from a marketing standpoint, from a understanding who he is, it was very much understood when he first started playing in the NBA. And he's found a way, to stay away from the distractions. And it's very hard. It's difficult to find anything bad about LeBron James. It is. There's no, and I mean, not that I'm looking for it.
Yeah.
But now that he's back in Cleveland and changed the one thing that people hated him for, that made him a villain, and really that's a sports film. There's nothing, there's nothing wrong with that. That's, he was a bad guy. He was the bad guy because he left Cleveland on national television. It's not that he left Cleveland, period, because he was a free agent. He was allowed to do that. It was that stupid TV show on ESPN that changed his image. Otherwise it would have been just, LeBron and Cleveland people going, oh, man, LeBron left us. But I think nationally a lot of people came on board with saying, wow, how could you do that on national TV? But he's corrected that by coming back. And, every time you tell LeBron James he can't do something, he does it. And he pulls it off. And this is just another chapter in that book. If he can pull this off with the crew that he has, I mean, it will truly be a spectacular feat. Don't think, though, that the Golden State Warriors are going to lay down and die here, because they are highly motivated. And last night was really the first time, I think, all playoffs, all season, other than they had a dog here, a dog there, that they found themselves in a dog fight to try to win a game, and they just didn't handle it very well.
Andy Baskin out of Cleveland, News Channel 5 and 92.3 The Fan. Andy, you're traveling back to Cleveland today. Safe travels to you, and thanks so much for your time, man. I know you've been on the road covering this team. Fascinating stuff. Really appreciate it.
No worries. Take care. I'm sure we'll talk again if you want to later in the week.